All right, let's jump straight into this explainer. Today, we're taking on literally the most profound mystery of the human mind, consciousness. For decades, philosophers and scientists have completely agonized over what's known as the hard problem. It's that massive, looming question of why our physical brains manage to produce this rich, vibrant inner world of felt experience. But what if the problem itself is totally false? What if we've basically just been tricked by our own biology? Picture this for a second. You're standing exactly at the North Pole, and I ask you to point north. Well, you can't, right? And it's not because your compass is busted. It's because the question, what lies north of the North Pole, is structurally impossible. It kind of wears the disguise of geography, but it fundamentally misrepresents reality. The wild argument we're exploring today is that the hard problem of consciousness is exactly this kind of question. And that brings us to the core thesis of our source text. It argues that the so-called hard problem of consciousness is just a complete illusion. We are simply physical matter that has somehow managed to model its own existence. The idea of this inexplicable, magical ghost hovering inside the biological machine is just a phantom. But to dismantle this illusion, we first need to understand exactly how it was built in the first place. Section 1. The hard problem, building the ultimate mystery. So, back in 1995, philosopher David Chalmers drew this really definitive line between the different mysteries of the mind. On one side, you've got the easy problems. How the brain discriminates stimuli, integrates information, controls behavior, basically the mechanical functions. But on the other side, you have the hard problem. Why is any of that mechanical functioning actually felt? Why is there an inner light at all? Why isn't the brain just processing all of this completely in the dark? To really feel the grip of this, let's look at Thomas Nagel's famous question from 1974. What is it actually like to be a bat? We can know every single physical fact about a bat's echolocation, its neurons, its microsecond timing, the whole shebang. But Nagel argued that we can never truly know its private, inner point of view. It really seems like the objective, physical facts just completely leave out the subjective experience. Section 2. The trap in the grammar. The stowaway verb. Okay, here is where it gets super interesting. Think about the phrase accompanied by. The crucial point here is that asking why brain processing is accompanied by experience automatically smuggles dualism right into the premise. To be accompanied by inherently implies two distinct things walking side by side, right? So when we ask why the brain's functioning is accompanied by an inner glow, we've already rigged the question. We've decided they're two separate objects that need some sort of magical bridging law to connect them. Think about a glass of water. We don't sit around demanding some magic bridging law between H2O and wetness, do we? Yet, we've totally fallen into the trap of doing exactly that for the brain and experience. Wetness isn't a chaperone escorting the water molecules around. It's literally just what a bunch of those molecules are, described at the human scale. It's one reality, two descriptions. Yet, we treat the brain's mechanics and our subjective experience as two entirely separate things, hallucinating a gap that literally does not exist in nature. And historically speaking, this exact kind of mystery always seems to evaporate once we actually understand the underlying mechanics. We used to think lightning required the wrath of a god. We thought living things needed a magical vital spark, because mere chemistry couldn't possibly explain life. But those gaps, they closed when we mapped the actual mechanisms of genetics and thermodynamics. This feeling of an unbridgeable gap isn't a map of reality. It's really just the shape of what we don't yet understand. All right, let's put this to the test with probably the most famous thought experiment in this space, the philosophical zombie. Now, this isn't a Hollywood monster. It's a hypothetical, exact, atom-for-atom duplicate of you. It acts exactly like you, talks like you, and even swears it's conscious. But inside, it is completely dark, zero subjective experience. Now, defenders of the hard problem will tell you, hey, if we can even conceive of this zombie, it proves consciousness is some separate, non-physical add-on. But hold on a second. Just because our minds can conceive of a zombie doesn't mean it's actually possible in the real world. Conceivability is a flaw in our concepts, not a passport between worlds. I can conceive of a world where water isn't made of H2O, but that's logically impossible in reality. The zombie is really just a failure of our imagination masquerading as a profound discovery. Let's look at another classic, Mary's room. Imagine Mary. She's a brilliant scientist who knows absolutely every single equation about wavelengths and the visual cortex from her black and white textbooks. But she has never, ever seen color. When she finally steps outside and sees a red tomato, she says, "Oh wow, so that's what red looks like." It really feels like she just discovered a brand new fact that physics totally left out, right? But here is the catch. Mary didn't actually discover a new non-physical fact. What she did was merely acquire a new knowing how skill to represent a physical fact she already completely knew. She gained a subjective mode of presentation. It's kind of like reading the sheet music for a symphony your entire life, and then finally hearing it played out loud by a full orchestra. It is the exact same object, the music. You're just grasping it through a completely different handle. Section 3. The brain's user illusion. Visualizing the ghost. Think about the desktop on your computer. You drag a little blue folder across the screen, right? But obviously there isn't an actual blue folder inside the monitor. It's a deliberate, highly useful fiction that hides the insanely complex magnetic disk so you can actually operate the computer. Misrepresentation doesn't need a genuine article to copy. A broken fuel gauge can confidently read full on a bone-dry tank. When your brain reports this ineffable inner glow, it's really just giving you a useful icon. It's a summary, not the raw physical truth of your firing synapses. So, why does your experience feel so incredibly raw and unmediated? Well, it all comes down to something called transparency. Your self-model is specifically engineered to hide its own complex wiring from you. Just like you look through a window without really noticing the glass, your brain doesn't show you the actual processing. You don't feel the neurons firing, you just feel the finished product. Because the machinery is entirely hidden, your brain naturally concludes that its experiences must be made of pure, unadulterated magic. When you break it down step by step, you can see exactly how the biological machine builds the entire show, explaining every supposedly magical feature through pure physical mechanism. First up, the global workspace broadcasts signals across the brain, which perfectly explains our spotlight of access. Second, predictive processing generates transparent hypotheses about the world, explaining why our experience feels like this concrete given reality. And third, the attention schema creates the stripped-down caricature of awareness, which is what gives us that distinct feeling of a localized inner witness. Section 4. The miracle of matter, resolving the meta problem. Okay, so if it is all just physical, why do we fight so incredibly hard to defend the mystery? This brings us to the meta problem. It essentially swings the camera around. We don't actually need to explain the magical ghost, we just need to explain the brain circuitry that insists there is a ghost. Our verbal reports insisting on a heart problem are themselves just physical evolutionary behaviors that can be fully, completely explained without needing actual qualia. I mean, a brain that summarizes its data through transparent icons will naturally output verbal reports swearing up and down that it has an inexplicable, non-physical inner life. And honestly, when you finally align these deep philosophical mysteries with their actual cognitive science answers, that unexplained residue, it shrinks down to absolutely nothing. That spotlight of attention, it's just a global broadcast in the brain. That brute, raw feeling of the color red, predictive transparency. And that ineffable inner witness hovering right behind your eyes, that's just your attention schema at work. We have literally explained the conviction itself using pure mechanics. The lone witness to the hard problem has been thoroughly, definitively debunked. Now, deflating this problem doesn't cheapen your pain or your joy or your human experience at all. In fact, the real miracle here is that you are an astonishing stretch of the physical universe that somehow learned to keep track of itself. The joy you feel is absolutely real. The grief is absolutely real. They were just never made of ghost stuff to begin with. Brain activity isn't a way of hurting less. It literally is the hurting. You are the universe waking up and modeling itself. I want to leave you with this final thought for today's explainer. It's time to stop looking for answers completely off the edge of the map and just embrace the magnificent, purely physical reality of your own existence. Demanding to know what lies beyond the physical brain is exactly like asking what lies north of the North Pole. The compass spins because you've already reached the destination. So, are you ready to drop the illusion and marvel at the breathtaking biological interface that makes you, you?